Welcome to Multiply Yourself with Adam Michael. Join the conversation at multiply-yourself.com.
Hi and welcome to Multiply Yourself episode 2, and in this episode I want to have a talk about prepayment, a question I often get asked from colleagues and people who question or ask me for a consultation, I guess, on outsourcing and building remote teams. Often talk about payment. When do you know when to pay them? How much? How do you pay them? How do you trust them that they're going to do the work? And I've heard too many stories of people prepaying remote workers, I guess on a contract basis, and it being a bit of a not so good story where the worker disappears and the work never gets done. And even in my own experience, I'll never cease to be amazed at the boldness of some people that I have been in contact with, who will even ask for prepayment before starting any work. At times, I've even had the situation where one of the first questions asked during a formal interview is the potential employee asking me if I could prepay them a week's work so that they could insert whatever reason here and be ready for work. And I would have to admit, if I am being honest, that in the early days of working remotely with other teams and outsourcing to contractors, I did fall into this trap once or maybe too many times. But really, in honesty, it all comes down to trust. I've had many conversations where the potential employee that I'm interviewing or discussing, even informally, has said to me, how will I know that you will pay me? That they've worked for people before and not being paid, which is a terrible story to hear, that these workers that I had interviewed had the experience of not being paid for work that they had done. And from my side, I would have to flip the coin and say to them, well, how would I know that you will do the work for me? Because in the past, I've had the unfortunate experience where I've paid people for work and it hasn't been completed. So ultimately, it's all about establishing trust in the relationship. Trust that they will do the work for you that you pay them for, and of course you will pay them for the work that they do. So in my journey with outsourcing and through some of the harder lessons that I guess I've had to learn, here's 4 suggestions for how I handle the request for prepayment. Number 1, escrow. Many online systems that facilitate freelancing include an escrow payment system that you can utilize. And in a simple explanation, if you're not familiar with escrow, it does mean that you prepay for the work. However, a third party holds that payment until you authorize that the work is completed. So the contractor has the benefit of knowing that you have the means and the ability to make the payment, and you have the benefit of being able to review and approve the work before payment is released. Now, in the early days, I had used Elance as a solution for this, and they have a great escrow system that allows you to make a payment which they hold once the contractor has noted that they have finished the job. They then request you to approve the work and they release the payment. And they also have a great dispute procedure and arbitration if that's ever needed. So escrow is a great option. It gives both of you the trust and a little bit of a backup that the work will get done and that the worker will get paid. Number 2, pay daily. This is something that I have often used as well, because you've got to keep in mind that the cause of the request is so often due to lack of trust that someone will be paid for the work. And as we've talked about already, that definitely does go both ways. But to overcome this, I have at times paid somebody at the end of each day to demonstrate my ability and willingness to pay them for the work that they complete. Other options around this would be to pay for a few hours work on a small project, or even pay just a small deposit up front. And whilst I don't suggest prepaying large amounts of money or for long-term periods up front, I personally at times have paid a small deposit to demonstrate my willingness to pay and to also provide an incentive to the worker to get the job finished. But this is a technique or a strategy, I guess, that I've used quite often, particularly paying daily. So just doing small tasks, and at the end of each day, getting a report from this contractor that I'm using of how many hours they've worked and instantly paying them. And it's worked really well in the past as a means to build up trust. Number 3, overcome the challenge. Something you got to keep in mind is perhaps the request for prepayment is actually for a legitimate and a realistic requirement, that there's a real need there as to why they are requesting a prepayment. And an example of this that I have encountered is the need to pay for an internet connection. Obviously, if somebody is looking to work in an online environment, they need to have an active and a reliable internet connection to be able to work effectively. So if this is the case, look for ways to overcome the particular challenge and get some assistance there. So 2 ways that I have done this in the past is to purchase time at an internet cafe on behalf of the worker, which is what they were requesting the prepayment for, was to get themselves a reliable connection at an internet cafe whilst they waited for their service provider to upgrade their home connection. And another was to use Sender, sender.com, SENDAH, and that was for a particular employee I was working with in the Philippines. And through that system, I was able to send prepaid internet load to their mobile phone. So I was essentially able to send them credit that they could then use their phone as an internet connection. And number 4, and finally, just don't do it. It's as simple as that. If you don't feel comfortable prepaying someone, or you can't overcome the challenges that it brings, then simply just don't do it. If this means that the relationship ceases, then in this case, you just begin to recruit another possible applicant from your pool. But at the end of the day, you have to do what you feel comfortable with. And if you're feeling pressured into prepaying someone, then maybe it's not the best situation. So these have been my 4 suggestions for how I overcome the challenge of prepayment and work towards building trust. So once again, it's using an escrow system for a payment, paying daily or in small increments, looking to overcome the challenges of why they are in need of a payment up front, and 4th and finally, just doing what you feel comfortable with the most. So please join the conversation at multiply-yourself.com, where this podcast will appear in also a blog post form, and I'd love you to leave a comment and let me know any other suggestions you have or things that have worked or even not worked for you in the past.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe for more content at multiply-yourself.com.